Rome, 42 BC. Amidst eternal stone walls and sun-drenched silver domes, the city exhaled the scent of blood, sweat, and power. But buried beneath the grandeur of the empire lay laws so dark, so grotesque, that the modern mind can barely comprehend, especially for those guilty of the most vile betrayal, adultery. It wasn't merely a matter of broken affection. It was a betrayal of honor, lineage, and the sacred order of the Roman household. This story begins with a name long buried in crumbling archives, Gaius Septimus Marius, a young patrician born into silk and silver, yet burdened with the final task of restoring the honor of a family disgraced by a scandal no one dared name. They whispered that Gaius's mother had once been caught sharing her body with a Greek slave amidst a bath of carnation flowers, a scene potent enough to annihilate a dynasty, if not for bribes and blades. Gaius grew up under murmurs behind his back, dagger-like glances from noble matrons, and the freezing silence of his father, Marcus Septimus Marius, who never touched his son again after the night he killed the slave with a red-hot chain in the courtyard. But he did not kill his wife. No, he let her live as evidence. A breathing shame to remind the bloodline that betrayal, when committed by a woman, must first be disgraced before punished. In Roman society, adultery, adulterium, was never merely private. It was political, legal, and above all, an issue of ownership. Women were considered property, extensions of paternal blood. A cheating wife was a threat to lineage, legitimacy, and family honor. And under the ancient laws, most notably Lex Julia de adulteriis coercendis, decreed by Augustus himself, husbands, fathers, even guardians were granted the right to exact punishment upon those caught in the act. Flagrantia, they called it, in the heat of the act. It was the single loophole for immediate execution, without trial. But like all things Roman, it had become a game of blood, power, and ritual. And Gaius understood that more than anyone. When he discovered his wife, Livia Calpurnia, had a secret lover, Gaius did not rage. He did not shout. He did not strike. He smiled, a smile that, according to later accounts, was colder than the Trevi fountain in winter. He knew that if he killed her in anger, he could be judged. But if he caught them in flagrantia, death would be legal. Honor would be restored. And so he prepared. A small dinner party, a reason to be out for the evening, a loyal servant tasked with watching. The trap set, like a bloody symphony waiting for its overture. Livia, beautiful and slender as a Grecian sculpture brought to life, walked unaware through her marble halls, every step echoing in Gaius's memory. Each one traced with a man's resolve forged from a father's silence. He returned home early. No hurried steps, no shouting, just the soft creak of a door pushed open, quiet and cold, like a sentence passed by Pluto himself. And there they were, Livia, in the arms of a curly-haired man, neither her husband nor her kin. Gaius did not burn with jealousy, but with deliverance. At last, he could do what his father failed to do, extinguish the shame at its root. No one in that room survived the night. But it did not end there. The next morning, the two traitors' bodies were laid out in the atrium, the central courtyard of the estate, where the ancestors of the Septimus family had once been venerated. Livia was no longer a noblewoman of Latium. Her skin was pale, her body covered in a blood-stained linen shroud, and her eyes were wide open, as if unable to believe how swiftly death had come. Gaius stood over her in silence, dressed in the deep black toga of mourning. But there was no grief in his face. He did not cry. He wanted Rome to witness this. He wanted the city to see. The honor of House Septimus had been cleansed with blood. According to the Lex Julia, Gaius was legally innocent. The law granted him the right to kill his adulterous wife and her lover, if caught in the act. But the law was precise. He had only 3 hours after the discovery. If he acted beyond that, he could be accused of premeditation or unlawful retribution. So the moment the blade cooled, Gaius summoned 2 witnesses, a minor magistrate and a priest, to verify the scene. Every step was calculated. Every ritual followed to the letter. This wasn't mere revenge. It was a rite, an exorcism of dishonor through sacred blood. But Rome was never a city where guilty souls found peace. A month after the incident, Gaius began hearing sounds in the night, silken footsteps brushing the marble, a breath against his ear as if someone stood just behind him. Servants whispered of a white figure moving through the corridor where Livia once passed each morning to water the flowers. One night, in the midst of fevered sleep, Gaius dreamed he had returned to the fateful room. But this time, he was the one caught, bound, judged, and stabbed to death by the very ghost of his wife. He woke drenched in sweat, his hand clutching the dagger he now kept beneath his pillow. That same night, he shattered every mirror in the house, for in each reflection he saw Livia. Not the living woman, but something paler, with eyes like ancient wells, eyes that did not accuse, did not hate. They simply watched, and never stopped watching. From that point, his mind began to crack. He sought out the augurs, sacred diviners, begging them to release him from this torment. One of them, blind and ancient, uttered only a single sentence. You have severed the balance between judgment and mercy. Blood cannot wash blood if the heart feels no pain. Then on a full moon night, while Rome celebrated the festival of Vinalia, Gaius walked alone to the temple of Venus, the same place where he had once prayed to win Livia's heart. He knelt, not to ask forgiveness, but to plead for forgetfulness. But Roman gods were never known for mercy. What he received was silence. The wind ceased. The torches did not flicker. And his voice echoed in the temple like the final breath of a soul too long untethered. From then on, Gaius saw no visitors. The house grew colder, his face gaunt. Servants claimed he would often whisper to someone in the forbidden room, the same room now chained shut, though a faint glow still leaked beneath the door each night as if something inside still breathed. No one asked questions. No one spoke aloud. But they all knew. Gaius Septimus Marius was no longer a man. He was a shell, an empty form bearing the title of nobility, hollowed out by a wound that would not clot. A wound named honor. That autumn, the winds of Rome shifted. Yellow leaves drifted silently down the Via Appia, as though the city itself mourned something long dead. But Gaius Septimus Marius still lived, or at least what remained of him. As one elderly slave said, his mind left the house weeks ago, but forgot to take the body with it. No one was permitted inside his private quarters. When servants brought food, they were instructed to place the tray before the ebony door, knock 3 times, and walk away without looking back. Many nights, from behind that door, the sound of a lyre could be heard, a soft, mournful melody of ancient Greek origin. It was the same tune Livia used to play after dinner. But Livia was dead. So who played? Rumors began to spread among the Roman elite. Some whispered that Gaius had preserved his wife's body, embalming her with exotic Eastern herbs and storing her in a cold chamber where he lit lamps and spoke to her as if nothing had ever happened. Others swore they'd seen him wandering near the temple of Ceres at midnight, muttering in Oscan, the ancient tongue of a people extinct long before Rome's founding. But no one dared approach. The law still stood with him, and his name, Marius, still carried the weight to silence any accusation with gold, steel, or both. Still, Rome did not sleep forever beneath shadows. One fog-thick winter night, a young slave girl named Sabina escaped the Septimus estate. She sought refuge at the temple of Minerva and told what would later be passed down only by word of mouth, never written, preserved in trembling whispers. Sabina said that Gaius didn't merely speak to Livia's ghost. He had begun to judge other women across the city, those he believed were adulteresses or disloyal to their husbands. These women, sometimes slaves, sometimes noble women, were brought into his villa under the guise of sanctuary of honor. None of them were ever seen again. One night, Sabina peeked through a crack in the wall. She saw Gaius kneeling before a statue, one carved in Livia's likeness, reciting accusations in archaic Latin. Before him stood a trembling young woman, bound, her mouth gagged with perfumed cloth. After the rites, Gaius would take a small blade and carve the words Pudicia Victa, chastity defeated, into her flesh, before vanishing with her into the same locked chamber. Sabina's testimony sent tremors through those who heard it. But like so many tales of the nobility, it was quickly buried, smothered by coins and blood. The girl vanished the very next morning. No body was ever found. Some say her corpse was thrown into the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's ancient sewer, where the rot of the city mingled with its forgotten sins. Still, suspicions grew. A low-ranking Praetorian officer named Lucius Varro launched a quiet inquiry. 2 days later, his body was found drifting beneath the Sublician Bridge, his belly slashed open, his lips sewn shut, a message to anyone thinking of speaking against Gaius. But Rome, for all its blood-drenched history, never forgets. And some spirits do not rest, especially those who die without a name. The following spring, nature intervened. A massive flood, the worst in a decade, ripped open a section of the Septimus estate's substructure. Citizens uncovered a hidden stone chamber behind a collapsed wall, filled with 12 marble busts. Each bore the face of a woman. Some were recognized. A noblewoman who vanished during the Saturnalia, a young girl believed to have eloped with a slave, even a former priestess banished from the temple for violating her vow of purity. At the center stood a statue of Livia, sculpted from pure white marble, so lifelike it chilled the soul. Her arms were open wide, as if embracing the silent souls around her, and beneath her feet, etched in crimson letters, were the words, Amo, ergo punio. I love, therefore I punish. The hidden chamber beneath the Septimus estate became a living nightmare for the entire city of Rome. No one knew how long it had existed or how it was constructed without leaving a trace on the estate's records. But what mattered was that each of the 12 marble busts, 12 silent women, had been sculpted in such excruciating detail that one could believe their very pores, their final breath, had been chiseled into stone. The Senate moved quickly to open a private investigation, not out of justice, but out of fear. They feared that if the matter wasn't handled delicately, the public would rise up. And the last thing a fractious empire needed was a scandal born of noble madness. Gaius Septimus Marius, once the symbol of patrician virtue, had become a myth devouring itself. He was arrested without resistance. Draped in a gray toga, eyes hollow, Gaius showed neither remorse nor fear. As he was escorted through the forum, crowds gathered. Rome, which feasted on executions as theater, stood hushed. There were no jeers, no stones thrown, no curses spat, only silence, like a burial shroud cast over the heart of an empire. His trial was held in the Basilica Julia, bathed in golden, dusty light from stained windows. Witnesses were summoned, slaves, former guests, even those who had known Gaius before his descent. Yet he remained mute. He neither denied nor defended. Only once, when asked why he had murdered the women, the accused adulteresses, did he lift his eyes and speak. In a voice as soft as wind slipping past a dying tree, he said, I only did what the law permitted. The courtroom froze, because, disturbingly, he was right. By the letter of the law, especially Lex Julia, every act taken individually could be justified if the woman had been caught in the act. The law did not define how many times. It did not demand physical evidence beyond the master's word. He had invoked the law not as shield, but as blade. What began as vengeance had transformed into doctrine, justice twisted into ceremony. The court could not sentence him to death, nor could they set him free. Instead, they delivered a punishment crueler than execution, damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. His name was to be erased from all records, all inscriptions, all public memory. His family forced to take a new surname. His estate flattened, statues smashed. Every trace of Gaius removed as if he had never drawn breath. Even children were forbidden from being named Gaius. In the eyes of Rome, he had become unborn. He was cast into an underground prison near Ostia, reserved for those too dangerous to be remembered. One prison guard, old and near death, later recalled that in his final years, Gaius began writing, not with pen, but with his fingernails, on the stone walls. The same phrases, over and over. Livia, I saved you from sin. I preserved the honor of our house. I loved you more than I loved myself. After 7 years, he died. No one knows whether from sickness, starvation, or surrender. His body was never buried, But the same old guards swore that on the night Gaius died, every torch in the tunnel blew out at once. When the flames returned, blood still dripped from his eyes. And so he vanished from history. But Rome remembers. The old laws still whisper through the legal veins of the empire. The story of the judge in the dark passed through generations, never written, always feared. Even today, in some ancient homes near the Forum, faded etchings have been found, barely visible warnings from a time when honor could kill. No one truly escapes the price of honor.